On the ridge, the villagers who had once cursed her now bowed their heads in shame, for they saw her not as cursed but as savior. The storm they had feared had destroyed not them but their enemies. The elders muttered prayers that their gods must have chosen her, though deep in their hearts they knew it was not divine blessing, but her own strength that had saved them. Some wept, others dared to call out her name, their voices trembling but true. And though the pain of their earlier rejection still cut deep, her heart eased slightly as she realized she was no longer alone. Even if fear lingered, even if mistrust remained, she had proven herself not by words, but by fire. The fires burned low as dawn crept again over the ruined forest. Light touching the broken earth and the girl who now sat in the middle of it all, her body marked forever by glowing veins, her soul carved by pain and resilience. And though she was still young, still unsure of what the future would hold, the galaxy already whispered of her. The child who had drunk a forbidden human serum by accident and survived. The alien girl who had turned from prey to predator. From cursed vessel to living storm, her story only beginning. But her final transformation complete. Not into a monster, not into a weapon, but into something greater, something the stars themselves would never forget. The human soldiers fought desperately to reach her, but they were pinned back by a wall of enemy fire, their leader's voice hoarse as he roared her name, urging her to fight, to resist. And though she heard him faintly through the ringing in her ears, it was not his voice that lit the fire inside her, it was the cruel laughter of her captors, the certainty in their tone that she was already theirs. Her body trembled violently, her chains rattling, and then her scream erupted, a scream so fierce it seemed to tear the sky itself. Golden light exploded from her eyes, her veins blazing like rivers of fire, the chains cracking under the force of her convulsions, and the ground split beneath her feet. Energy pouring outward in waves that melted the weapons of her captors and hurled them into the air like dry leaves in a storm. She collapsed forward on her knees, her body still bound by fragments of broken chains, her hair glowing like fire around her face. And the silence that followed lasted only a breath before the forest itself shook again. For the serum had answered her pain with more than power. It had unlocked something deeper, something raw and terrifying. Her captors scrambled to rise, their once confident voices breaking into shouts of fear. One screamed that she could not be controlled, that the serum had gone beyond its limits, and another cried that she would burn them all. But still they rushed her, desperate to seize what they saw slipping away. The humans surged forward too, weapons blazing. But even they slowed as they realized the air itself bent around her. Every step she took cracking the soil, sparks bursting in her footprints, her eyes wide and glowing with untamed fire. She no longer looked like the child they had seen trembling and weeping. She looked like something reborn, a storm given shape, her small frame trembling with power that seemed endless. And though her lips whispered that she did not want to hurt anyone, her body betrayed her with every surge, every heartbeat sending destruction outward. One of the enemy commanders, armored in obsidian plating, dared to step close, raising a blade humming with alien energy, shouting that she was his, that she was destiny, and he swung it toward her head. But before the strike could fall, her hand rose instinctively, golden light bursting from her palm, the blade shattering like glass. The commander hurled backward into the trees, his scream cutting short as he vanished into fire and smoke. And all who saw it froze, their eyes wide. For she had not only defended herself, she had obliterated him with a gesture, and the silence that followed pressed on every heart, friend and foe alike. Because they knew now she was not prey, not a tool, but a force neither side could fully control. But the power came with pain. Her body convulsed again, blood trickling from her nose as the serum pushed her past the edge. She fell to the ground, clutching her chest, her breaths short and shallow. And in that fragile moment, she looked at the broken chains still hanging from her wrists, whispering that she wanted it to end, that she could not carry this storm any longer. But her tears glowed brighter than before, falling onto the cracked soil and sizzling into steam. Her body pulsed once more, and the humans finally reached her side. The leader kneeling beside her, his voice urgent, telling her she was stronger than she believed, that if she gave in now, the serum would own her forever, that she had one choice left, To master it or be destroyed by it, her golden eyes lifted to his scarred face, and for the first time she believed him. Even as the enemies regrouped and prepared to strike again, her heart pounded not with fear but with something sharper, a decision that rose above the chaos. She stood slowly, her legs trembling but unbroken, her glowing veins steadying with each breath, the serum raging inside her but not consuming her, and she clenched her fists, lifting her gaze to the enemies circling closer. Her voice cracked but strong as she declared that she would not belong to them, not to humanity, not to anyone, that she was no longer prey to be hunted, nor a weapon to be forged. Her words burned in the air like fire, and for the first time, the humans and villagers alike heard not the voice of a cursed child, but of something greater, something choosing its own path. The breaking point had come, and though her body still shook, her spirit stood unyielding, the storm inside her ready to either consume her or become hers to command. The battlefield holding its breath as the next moment promised either her final fall or her first true rise. The battlefield was a grave of smoke and silence, broken only by the groans of injured soldiers and the hiss of fires eating through the forest. The alien girl stood at the center, her small frame trembling, her glowing veins pulsing like rivers of molten light beneath fragile skin. Her breaths harsh but steady, her eyes burning gold as she looked around her, seeing both humans and enemies frozen in awe and fear, and within her chest the serum still roared, clawing at her mind, pushing her to lose herself and become nothing but the storm. But she clenched her fists tighter, whispering to herself that she was not prey, not a curse, not a weapon to be used. Her words cracked and low, yet sharp enough to cut the air. And as her voice echoed inside her own heart, something shifted. The wild energy thrashing within her began to bend, not vanish, not weaken, but bend toward her will like iron shaped under flame. Her body arched with pain as though every vein fought her decision. But she refused to surrender. She pushed harder, her scream rising until it shook the ground. And then the chaos inside her began to settle, like a storm pulling into a single eye of calm. The hostile soldiers hesitated, their weapons buzzing with power, their commanders shouting for them to strike before she stabilized. For they could see what was happening. They could feel the shift in the air. The girl no longer a child drowning in uncontrollable power, but something far more terrifying. An alien host who had learned to command the serum instead of being consumed by it. They charged, their armored boots tearing into the dirt, chains and weapons raised to bind her once more. But she lifted her hands, her glowing eyes narrowing. And with a cry that split the sky, she unleashed her power, not in wild bursts as before, but in controlled arcs of light that cut through their ranks like living blades. Enemy soldiers hurled back by precise strikes that shattered their armor and silenced their screams. The ground erupted where her energy struck, but this time the destruction did not lash blindly in all directions. It flowed exactly where she willed it, the storm no longer a curse but an extension of her will. And the villagers watching from the ridge fell to their knees in shock, unable to comprehend that the girl they had cast out was now wielding the strength of a god. The humans lowered their weapons, awe etched into their scarred faces as they realized she had achieved what even their strongest warriors could not. She had mastered the serum not with rage or blind aggression, but with sheer will. A child forging control where hardened soldiers had fallen to madness. Their leader's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion but in respect. His voice low as he muttered that she was no longer a mistake, no longer an accident but something new entirely, a bridge between what was human and what was alien, a being that neither side had expected, and for the first time since their arrival, his tone carried hope. The enemy ships above roared in fury, beams of energy slicing down from the clouds, turning the clearing into a furnace of fire and ash. The girl looked up, her heart hammering, and as fear flickered in her chest, the serum surged in answer. She raised both arms high, her golden light flaring until it rivaled the fire raining down. And with a scream, she sent a wave of energy into the sky, colliding with the beams, bending them back toward the ships that had unleashed them. Explosions tore across the clouds as the hunters above were consumed by their own fire, their hulks breaking apart and falling like burning meteors into the forest. the shockwaves rattling the ground, yet she stood firm, her body glowing brighter than the falling wreckage. Her golden eyes locked on the horizon as silence slowly returned, broken only by the crackle of flames and the stunned breaths of those who had witnessed what no one thought possible. She collapsed to her knees, not from defeat but from exhaustion, her glowing body dimming back to a faint pulse. Her breaths shallow but steady, the humans approached carefully, their leader kneeling before her, his scarred face soft with respect, as he told her that she had done what none of their kind had achieved, that she had taken the serum and not only survived but mastered it, that she was living proof of something beyond either of their species, a symbol of what could be rather than what should never have been. His words carried weight, and for the first time she felt no shame in hearing them. Her tears still glowed faintly, but now they fell not in despair but in release, her body trembling as she whispered that she only wanted to belong, only wanted to live not as a weapon but as herself, her voice breaking the last silence of fear that clung to the villagers. But as the night deepened and the smoke thinned, far above in the skies, other eyes were already watching, ships cloaked in shadow drifting silently beyond the clouds, carrying those who had heard rumors of the serum's awakening, enemies of humanity who would pay any price to claim such a weapon for themselves, their voices cold with greed as they spoke of the glowing alien girl, the accidental vessel of human military power, and how she would soon belong to them. The forest below unaware that the greatest danger was no longer the serum itself, but those who now hunted her for the promise of what she might become. The dawn broke heavy and gray, the forest floor still scarred from the violent storms of energy she had unleashed the night before. Smoke rose from cracked soil, and the villagers dared not approach the place where she had fallen, for they whispered that the cursed glow might still cling to the earth. Yet while they trembled in fear high above the clouds, ships cloaked in shadows drifted silently, their metallic hulls shaped like daggers in the sky, belonging to a hostile alien faction that had been tracking human movements for years. And when their scouts intercepted whispers of a serum gone loose, of a child glowing with unnatural fire, they hungered for it, speaking in cold voices that this girl could become a weapon, not just for humanity but for them, that she could be broken, bent, and forged into a living tool of war. Their ships slid lower through the atmosphere, their sensors scanning the world, locking onto the unstable energy pulsing in the forest where she slept fitfully. Her body curled against the roots of a twisted tree, her breaths ragged, each one glowing faintly in the darkness like dying embers, unaware that the storm she carried within had already drawn predators from the stars. The humans who had come for her were not blind to this danger. Their scanners buzzed with warnings of incoming signals. The leader's jaw tightened as he muttered that their worst fear had come true, that others had noticed the activation of the serum. His squad exchanged uneasy looks, each man and woman hardened by battle, but shaken by the thought of what would happen if an unstable alien host of the serum fell into enemy hands. One soldier whispered that if the hostile fleet reached her first, she would be turned into a weapon powerful enough to shatter planets. Another growled that it would mean the destruction of not just her people but countless others. The leader silenced them with a glare and gave the only order left: find her before they do, no matter the cost. Yet even as he spoke, the villagers on the ridge raised their voices, demanding that the girl be taken far away, that she never return. Some begged the humans to kill her before she brought ruin upon them, their voices sharp with terror, but the humans ignored them. For their focus was no longer on the frightened villagers but on the growing shadow in the skies above. The girl stirred awake, her sharpened senses twitching with the sound of engines in the distance. The faint metallic hum not natural to her world, her golden eyes snapped open, wide and fearful, her body aching but alive. The serum still burning deep in her veins, she rose shakily, leaning on the tree for support. And for the first time she realized she was being hunted, not just by her own people's fear or the humans' suspicion, but by something worse, something alien and cruel. She could feel their hunger pressing down on her, as though unseen eyes had already marked her as prey. Panic seized her chest, her heart racing so fast sparks leapt from her fingertips. She stumbled forward, determined to run, but her legs carried her with unnatural speed, her bare feet cracking the roots of trees as she pushed deeper into the wilderness. her glowing form weaving between shadows like a flame refusing to be smothered. Yet no matter how far she ran, she knew they would come, that they were already here. The humans tracked her trail quickly, the leader's voice sharp as he pushed his squad harder, their boots heavy against the forest soil, scanners buzzing louder with every step. One of them muttered that the signal was unstable, spiking wildly, which meant her body was losing control faster. Another whispered that time was running out, that soon she would either master the serum or it would consume her. Their words cut short by the sudden thunder of engines above as the hostile ships broke through the clouds. Their hulls black as night, alien markings glowing faintly like scars across steel. The villagers screamed and fell to their knees, pointing toward the sky as fire streaked through the clouds. The invaders descending with hunger in their eyes, the humans cursed under their breath, raising their weapons and spreading into formation. Their leader muttering that the hunt had begun, and whoever reached the girl first would decide her fate. In the forest clearing, the girl collapsed to her knees, clutching her chest as waves of heat tore through her veins, the serum inside her reacting violently to the presence of danger, as though preparing her body for battle she did not want. Her vision blurred, golden light flickering in her eyes, and she whispered brokenly to herself that she was not a weapon, that she was not a curse, but her body betrayed her. Glowing brighter with each terrified heartbeat, she screamed as sparks shot outward, scorching the grass and trees around her, a beacon of fire that the enemy ships immediately locked onto, their metallic wings shifting as they descended. Warriors dropping from the sky with armor dark and cruel, their weapons humming as they moved in unison, their voices sharp and cold as they spoke of capturing her alive, of breaking her until she obeyed. Her body trembled, her heart pounding, and for a moment she felt she was already trapped, already lost. The humans reached the clearing just as the first wave of enemies closed in, energy weapons raised, their leader shouting for his squad to form a shield line, gunfire crackling through the night as the clash began. The villagers watching from afar, torn between fear and awe as the ground shook with war. The girl stood frozen in the middle of it all, her body glowing brighter, her breath shallow, her tears streaming as she whispered she only wanted it to stop, but the serum pulsed inside her, answering not with peace but with fire, her veins burning. Her scream tearing from her throat as arcs of golden energy erupted outward, striking enemies and allies alike, throwing soldiers into the air, scorching the battlefield in an explosion of raw power. And when the dust cleared, she stood trembling, her glowing body blazing like a living star, the hunters closing in, the humans barely holding their line, and the galaxy itself waiting to see if she would become salvation or destruction, prey or predator, weapon or something far greater. The battle raged in the clearing, smoke curling into the sky, the forest trembling under the weight of weapons and screams. The alien girl stood in the center of it all, her glowing body pulsing like a living beacon, her breaths ragged as though every inhale might shatter her chest. The serum inside her veins clawed for release, answering to her fear, her sorrow, her rage, and each time her heart thundered, it sent another wave of energy bursting from her small frame. Throwing men and machines into the dirt, the human soldiers struggled to contain both her and the enemy that surrounded them, their leader shouting orders as his squad fired into the dark-armored invaders. But the enemy pushed harder, their hunger not for the fight itself, but for the girl, their voices sharp as they called for her capture. Chains rattling in their hands, promises of power whispered through the chaos, and she staggered back, her eyes wide, realizing that they did not fear her, they wanted her, wanted the storm inside her to become their weapon. She tried to run, but the enemy closed in too quickly, their armored claws grabbing her arms. Dragging her down into the dirt, she screamed, her body convulsing as sparks burned across her skin. But their restraints were forged from alloys that resisted energy, heavy chains snapping around her wrists and ankles, digging into her glowing flesh, her body arched in agony, her cries echoing through the forest. And in that moment, she felt smaller than she ever had before, a child trapped in the hands of giants. Yet inside her the serum roared, a violent tide refusing to bow. The enemies laughed, pulling her upright, telling her she was theirs now, that she would be bent, broken, reshaped, and unleashed against humanity, their cruel words sinking into her ears like poison. and her tears fell, glowing like molten drops. Her heart pounding so loud it drowned their voices, her mind whispering that she could not let it happen, that she could not become a weapon for those who would use her to destroy. The villagers, who had followed from a distance, now stood on the ridge above, their wide eyes glowing with reflected fear as they watched the child they had once called their own destroy the ground where she stood. They whispered curses, prayers, and desperate questions. Some begged the humans to take her away before she brought ruin to them all, while others trembled in silence, unable to look away. Their voices carried faintly through the night air, and the girl heard them, every cruel word sharpening her grief. She raised her head toward them, her eyes burning with a golden light that did not belong to her kind. And in that moment she felt both rage and despair, the serum twisting her emotions into weapons, magnifying every heartbeat into a war drum echoing in her skull. She staggered forward, her legs moving as though guided by another will, each step cracking the earth beneath her bare feet, the air vibrating around her like a storm preparing to break. The soldiers closed in cautiously, their tranquilizer darts loaded again, but the leader hesitated, knowing that pushing her further might unleash something far worse than death. The girl's body convulsed, and with one desperate cry she threw her hands outward, a sphere of light erupting around her, flinging rocks and trees outward as if an explosion had torn through the valley. The humans shielded themselves, their armor groaning under the pressure. The villagers on the ridge screamed and stumbled back as dust and debris filled the sky, and when the light faded, she was on her knees again, gasping for air, her body drenched in sweat. But the ground around her was blackened, trees reduced to smoldering stumps, and the stream nearby boiled with unnatural heat. She looked at her trembling hands in horror, whispering that she had become a monster, her tears sizzling into steam as they touched her burning cheeks. Yet even as she cursed herself, her body pulsed with another surge, stronger than before, as though the serum itself hungered to be released again. The leader finally stepped forward, his voice firm but calmer than before. He told her she was not cursed, not a monster, but the result of human science gone wrong, that her suffering was their failure, not her fault, and for a moment her glowing eyes softened, her breath slowing as though the words had reached her. But then one of the villagers cried out from the ridge, shouting that she was lying, that the girl was cursed by the gods, and that she must be destroyed. The girl flinched at the sound, her heart pounding painfully, and the storm inside her flared again. Her scream ripped through the valley louder than thunder, and the soldiers stumbled back as blue fire licked across her arms, and her eyes blazed so brightly they lit the forest like a second sun. She staggered to her feet, her small frame trembling but terrifying, and everyone who looked at her now realized the truth. She was no longer the innocent child they had known. She was becoming a living weapon, one that even the humans themselves could no longer be sure they could stop. She fell again, curling into herself, her breaths harsh and broken, her glowing skin dimming for a moment as exhaustion dragged her down, the forest now silent except for the crackle of burning wood. The humans and villagers watched from opposite sides, united only by the same thought that none dared to say aloud. The accident that began with a simple sip of human liquid had awakened something far greater, and if it continued, she might become a force that would not only change their world, but perhaps the fate of every world beyond. The forest lay in uneasy silence after the storm she had unleashed, smoke rising in thin threads from the blackened ground. The air still heavy with the crackle of energy that clung to her trembling body. The girl sat slumped against a scorched tree, her chest rising and falling as though every breath was a battle, her glowing eyes dimmed with exhaustion, yet still faintly burning in the darkness. And around her the humans stood in wary formation, weapons lowered but ready, their leader stepping forward slowly, removing his helmet to reveal a scarred face hardened by years of war. His voice carried the weight of truth as he told the villagers, who watched fearfully from the ridge, that what she had swallowed was never meant for her kind. It was not food or blessing, not even medicine, but a creation of desperation, a human military serum designed in secret labs to turn ordinary soldiers into living weapons. The humans had made it to fight wars they thought they could not win, Wars where bodies were pushed beyond their natural limits. Strength multiplied, reflexes sharpened, aggression amplified until fear itself was erased. But it came with a price. It burned through the mind and soul, breaking those who were too weak, and even the strongest soldiers risked madness if they carried it too long. And then his voice grew heavier as he admitted that if this was dangerous for humans, for an alien body it was far worse, unpredictable, unstable, and likely fatal. The villagers gasped at his words, clutching their cloaks tighter around themselves, whispering that the girl had become a vessel of poison, that she carried the madness of another world inside her, and some cried out to the humans to end her life before the curse spread further. But the girl heard every word, her sharpened hearing piercing through their fear, and her heart sank as her people's voices turned sharper than any blade. She whispered to herself that she never meant to bring ruin, never meant to hurt anyone. But her voice trembled with both sorrow and anger, because no matter how much she wished, she could not undo what she had done. The serum lived in her veins now, rewriting her with every passing heartbeat. The human leader knelt before her, keeping his distance, his voice softer now, telling her that what was happening was not her fault, that she was an accident but not a monster, that their own mistakes had cursed her body, and that she needed to learn control or the serum would consume her completely. She lifted her eyes to him, her glow reflecting in his scarred face, and for a moment she felt a spark of hope. Yet before it could take root, another soldier behind him spoke coldly, saying they were wasting time, that she was too unstable to be saved, that their orders were clear, and she should be contained or destroyed before she triggered something worse. The girl flinched at those words, her tears glowing faintly as they slid down her cheeks, and her chest tightened with both pain and rage. The storm inside her answering before she could silence it, sparks racing across her arms and shoulders, the soldiers tightening their grips on their weapons, their fear sharpening in the night air. The leader barked for silence among his squad, but the truth could not be hidden, and so he spoke plainly, telling the girl and the villagers that the serum inside her was only a prototype, one of many created during humanity's darkest wars, meant to forge Deathworld soldiers who could tear through armies alone. And though most vials had been destroyed when the experiments were deemed too unstable, a few had been lost, scattered in the chaos of retreat, and one of those had found its way to her hands. His voice grew quiet then, almost ashamed, as he admitted that even they had not intended to recover it at first, believing it lost forever. But when their scanners detected its activation on this world, they had no choice but to return, for once unleashed. It would not stop until the host either mastered it or perished. The girl's body trembled at his words, her mind spinning as she whispered that she did not want to perish, that she did not want to be cursed, that she wanted to live, to belong again. Her voice so fragile it almost broke the silence around her. But the leader only bowed his head, telling her that if she wanted to survive, she must endure more pain than she could imagine, for the serum would test her will again and again, and few had ever mastered it. Fewer still had survived long enough to learn control. Her heart pounded in her chest, the glow in her veins pulsing faster, as though the serum itself stirred at his words, hungering to prove them true. And the villagers shrank back further on the ridge, muttering that no child could endure such a trial, that she was doomed and should be cast away before her end dragged them all down with her. The girl rose shakily to her feet, swaying as her body fought against itself, her voice rising in anger and despair as she asked why the humans had ever created such a thing, why they had made poisons that turned lives into weapons. Her voice cracked like glass, but the power in it shook the trees. Her glowing eyes burning with both grief and fury, the leader did not answer at first, only staring at her with guilt carved deep into his scars, before finally whispering that humanity had always been a Deathworld species, born to survive by any means, and that sometimes survival demanded terrible creations. His words hung heavy in the air, leaving silence behind them, a silence that pressed against the girl's chest until she felt her knees weaken. But instead of collapsing, she clenched her fists, sparks snapping between her fingers, her voice low and trembling as she said that if this power was inside her now, then she would not let it break her. She would not let it end her as a victim. Even if it turned her into something her people feared, she would fight to control it, to own it. Her declaration burned brighter than her tears, and though the villagers whispered curses and the soldiers exchanged uneasy glances, even the leader's eyes widened faintly at the sound of her determination. By morning, hunters from the village found the path of destruction left where she had passed. Broken branches, burned patches of grass, and deep claw-like marks on stone where her trembling hands had touched. They returned to the elders with grim faces, declaring that she could no longer be considered one of them, that she had become something different, something dangerous. And so the decision was made to cut her off from the community. While they prayed the curse would not return to haunt them, the girl, hidden in the forest, heard their voices carried on the wind. Her sharpened senses catching every cruel word, her tears fell silently, but inside her, the burning did not stop. The serum continued its work, preparing her for something far greater and far more terrifying than any of them could imagine. And as the second night fell, she realized that her life would never be the same, and that her people were right about one thing. She was no longer the girl they had known, but something else entirely. A living vessel of human military power trapped in an alien body. And though she feared what she might become, the world around her had only begun to fear her more. The stars hung low above the alien forest that night. Cold and silent, but hidden among them was a streak of silver light as a human dropship cut through the atmosphere, its engines humming softly before vanishing into the clouds. The villagers did not see it land, for they were still too shaken by the girl's strange power. But deep in the valley, on the edge of the forest, human soldiers stepped out of the ship, their armor black and their eyes sharp behind tinted visors. They moved with practiced silence, scanning the land with strange devices that beeped faintly. The leader raised a hand and spoke in a low voice. Confirming their fear, the missing military serum had been activated, its signal pulsing across their trackers like a warning. One soldier muttered that someone must have drunk it. Another cursed under his breath, for they all knew what that meant. The formula was never meant for alien bodies. It was designed for human warriors only, meant to enhance speed, strength, and aggression beyond natural limits. And if an alien had swallowed it, the effects would be unpredictable and possibly catastrophic. The leader ordered the squad to move, their boots crunching over the dry earth as they followed the unstable energy signature leading them straight toward the village. By dawn, the girl had returned to the outskirts, too afraid to enter but too desperate to stay away. Her body trembling with exhaustion after another night of uncontrollable bursts of power, her glowing eyes hidden under her tangled hair. She crouched near a stream, splashing her face, whispering to herself that she only wanted to be normal again. But the water itself rippled strangely around her hands, as though repelled by the invisible force in her blood. She clenched her fists and began to cry softly. But her sharpened senses caught something unusual, a faint metallic hum in the distance. Not natural to her world, she froze, lifting her head. And in that same moment, the humans entered the forest nearby, their weapons held low but ready, their helmets scanning every movement, until one of them spotted the burned patch of grass where she had slept. The leader bent down, touching the ground, and the earth still carried the faint heat of her body. He straightened slowly, muttering that they were too late. She had already begun to change. The villagers saw them first, their eyes widening as armored figures approached with strange weapons and unreadable faces. Fear spread quickly, for the humans had not been seen in their land for many years, and old stories painted them as both saviors and destroyers. The elders stepped forward, demanding to know why they had returned, their voices trembling but firm. The human leader only answered coldly, asking if anyone had found a small container. His words heavy and sharp, the villagers exchanged uneasy glances, then whispered that a foolish girl had drunk something she should not have. The humans stiffened at once, their helmets turning toward one another, and then the leader spoke in a tone that chilled the air, saying that if she had truly consumed the serum, she was no longer safe, no longer one of them, and that they had come to retrieve her before the formula destroyed everything around her. But the villagers shook their heads, saying she had already been cast out, that she had gone into the forest, their voices laced with both relief and guilt, hoping the humans would take her far away and never return. The girl, hidden among the trees, heard every word. her sharpened hearing catching the human's cold tone and her people's betrayal. Her chest tightened with pain, tears blurring her glowing vision. She pressed herself against the bark of a twisted tree, her body trembling as sparks flickered from her arms. Her mind screamed that she should run, but something inside her whispered that she could not keep running forever. She watched silently as the humans spread out, their scanners beeping louder as they closed in on her. One of them paused, looking directly toward her hiding place as if he could feel her presence. Her breath caught, her heart racing so fast the air around her seemed to hum. She tried to step back, but the branch beneath her foot snapped, a sharp sound that cut through the silence. And at once 3 rifles lifted in her direction. Red beams of light scanning through the leaves, she gasped and bolted, her body moving faster than she thought possible, her feet pounding against the earth, leaving cracks in the soil with every step. The humans shouted, giving chase, their boots thundering behind her. Weapons flashing as tranquilizer darts whizzed past her ears, but her body twisted and leapt with unnatural speed, her glowing form weaving through the trees like lightning, the serum giving her both power and terror. The chase carried her deep into the valley, her body aching yet unstoppable, until at last her legs gave out and she collapsed near a ridge. The humans circling her quickly, their weapons raised but not firing. One of them stepped forward, his voice cold but not unkind, telling her to stay still, that they could help her. But she shook her head violently, whispering through her trembling lips that she did not trust them, that she did not want their help. Her voice cracked with fear and anger. The humans exchanged uneasy glances, one muttering that she was too far gone, another insisting that maybe she could still be saved. The leader's voice cut through the argument, saying she was dangerous, and if she could not be controlled, she must be contained. The words echoed in her ears like a sentence, and the fear inside her turned to something darker. Her heart thundered, her skin burned with light, and before any of them could react, a burst of energy exploded from her body, a wave that threw the soldiers back, their armor sparking as they crashed to the ground, the ridge itself cracking beneath her as dust rose into the sky. She stood trembling, her glowing eyes filled with both terror and defiance, staring at the humans who now realized that what they had come to find was no longer just a mistake, but something far more powerful and far more dangerous than they had ever expected. The night had fallen heavy over the forest, yet the glow from her trembling body lit the trees like fireflies caught in a storm. The alien girl stood on shaking legs, her chest rising and falling as waves of heat tore through her veins, her breaths ragged and uneven, and the humans who had been thrown to the ground by her sudden outburst scrambled back to their feet, their weapons raised again, though their eyes behind the visors betrayed something more than command. It was fear, the kind of fear soldiers rarely allowed themselves to feel. One of them whispered that the serum had gone too deep, that her body was not rejecting it, but changing with it, and that she was becoming something neither alien nor human. The leader barked for silence and signaled them to advance. But before they could take a step forward, the girl clutched her head with both hands and screamed, the sound so sharp and unnatural that the forest birds erupted into the night sky. Fleeing in chaos, her scream was followed by a surge of raw energy bursting from her, arcs of pale blue lightning snapping across her arms and chest, scorching the ground beneath her, and the soldiers staggered back, realizing their rifles and darts would do little against the storm now growing inside her fragile frame. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed, her fingers digging into the soil, the earth beneath her cracking and trembling as if it could feel her pain. Her glowing veins pulsed brighter with every heartbeat. Her tears glistened as she cried that she wanted it to stop, that she never asked for this. Her voice filled with the broken innocence of someone too young to carry such a burden. Yet the serum inside her ignored her pleas, her body shuddering as more sparks erupted, sending shards of energy whipping through the air. Cutting branches cleanly from trees and sending them crashing down, the humans dove for cover, the leader shouting orders as his squad tried to contain the storm without harming her. But even they began to understand the truth. They had no control here. She was no longer a victim of the serum. She was the living core of it, a vessel unstable yet terrifyingly strong. The alien world was quiet that evening, the sun setting behind tall red mountains that looked like burning walls across the horizon, And in the shadows of those mountains, a small village of simple stone huts stood where life moved slowly, with children playing and elders telling stories by the fires. But among them was a young alien girl who was curious about everything, always wandering beyond the safe borders of her people's land, searching for things the others ignored. And it was on this day that her curiosity led her into a dry cave where the air smelled strange and the dust carried the scent of metal that did not belong to her world. Deep inside, she found a small container made of a hard, shiny material she had never seen before. It was marked with strange human symbols that she could not read, and though her heart pounded as she touched it, her hunger and thirst made her believe it might be some kind of food or medicine left behind by travelers from the stars. So she held it tightly, her fingers shaking, and slowly opened the lid with a soft hiss as the seal broke. A strange liquid shimmered inside, thick and glowing faintly in the dim light, and though her instincts told her to be careful, her empty stomach overpowered her thoughts. She raised it to her lips and drank. The taste was bitter, sharp like fire on her tongue, and the moment it slid down her throat, her body reacted violently. Her chest tightened, her veins burned, and her breath turned heavy as if fire had spread through her blood. She gasped and stumbled backward, dropping the container which cracked against the stone floor, spilling the last drops onto the ground. She clutched her chest, her eyes wide with fear, and fell to her knees as strange heat surged through her body. Her skin tingled, her vision blurred, and then she saw her hands glowing faintly, faint lines of light pulsing like fireflies trapped under her skin. Outside, a few villagers who had followed her curious trail now stood at the cave's mouth, their eyes widening as they saw her shaking and glowing. Whispers spread like wind. Some believed she had touched something cursed. Others thought she had been blessed by forgotten gods, but fear was louder than faith. They stepped back nervously, not daring to approach her, as the glow from her body grew brighter in the fading light of evening. She tried to stand, but her legs gave way. The ground beneath her seemed to tremble with each beat of her racing heart, and she felt her body slipping out of her control. Her arms jerked as if pulled by invisible strings, and sweat dripped down her pale skin. Her mouth opened to scream, but no sound came. Only a heavy gasp that echoed against the cave walls. Her eyes darted to the broken container, and for the first time she wondered if she had made a mistake that could not be undone. The whispers of the villagers grew louder. They spoke of calling the elders, of warning the others. Some turned and ran back to the village to spread the news, while others simply watched, frozen in terror, their fear mixing with curiosity because none of them had ever seen such power inside their kind. It was unnatural, dangerous, and yet strangely mesmerizing. They saw her body shining in the dark cave like a lantern of living fire. And for a moment silence fell as they realized something impossible was happening before their eyes. The girl's heart pounded faster and faster, so loud she could hear it in her ears. And then a sharp pain shot through her chest. She cried out at last, her scream breaking through the silence and sending chills down the spines of everyone present. Her voice carried beyond the cave. Echoing into the valley, birds scattered from the trees, and animals fled as if sensing a storm rising. She fell flat to the ground, her fingers twitching as sparks of energy flickered from her skin. Tiny arcs of light jumping like lightning between her hands, and the air itself seemed heavy, pressing down on the frightened villagers. The young girl tried to crawl out, but her limbs refused to obey. Every nerve in her body felt alive, burning, trembling, and the more she struggled, the stronger the light inside her grew, until her entire body pulsed with waves of energy, her veins glowing beneath her skin, her eyes flashing with a strange golden fire that did not belong to her species. And in that moment she felt both alive and close to death, as if her body was breaking apart and rebuilding itself at the same time. She collapsed again, her breathing wild and shallow, her heart racing as though it would burst. And the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was the terrified faces of her people backing away from her glowing body, too afraid to touch her, too afraid to help, leaving her alone on the cold cave floor, surrounded by whispers of fear. Her fate now tied to the strange human formula she had swallowed, a choice she made out of innocence, but one that would change her forever. The village was restless that night, the strange light from the cave still haunting everyone's eyes. and whispers moved from hut to hut like restless winds. They spoke of the young alien girl who had drunk the forbidden liquid. They said her body glowed like a star, and that her scream was not the voice of a child, but something darker, something unnatural, the elders gathered, their wrinkled faces carved with worry, debating whether she should be cast out before the curse spread to the others. But before they reached a decision, the girl herself awoke on the cold stone floor of the cave. Her body shivering, though heat still pulsed under her skin, her eyes opened slowly, and the world looked different, every detail sharper, the air filled with scents she had never noticed before. She could hear the faraway rustle of leaves and the soft heartbeat of a lizard crawling under a rock. And though her body felt weak, her senses had grown too strong. She tried to stand, but her muscles jerked as though they no longer belonged to her. And when she touched the wall for balance, the rock cracked slightly beneath her fingers as if she had struck it with force. Her heart raced as she pulled her hand back, staring in disbelief at the faint crack lines on the stone. Fear and confusion battled inside her, because she did not understand what was happening to her body, nor what she had become. She stumbled back to the village, every step heavy, as though her body carried weight it had never carried before. And when the villagers saw her, they gasped and stepped away, their eyes wide with suspicion. Some of the children screamed and hid behind their mothers. The elders came forward slowly, their staffs tapping against the earth. They studied her glowing eyes and trembling body, and one of them asked in a voice filled with both fear and command, what had she swallowed? What had she brought into their home? The girl tried to answer, her voice shaking as she explained about the shiny container and the strange, bitter liquid. And the elders' faces darkened at her words, for they knew it was no food or blessing, but a remnant of the humans who once fought wars across the stars. The whispers turned to accusations, calling her reckless, cursed, and dangerous. One elder demanded that she be banished before disaster struck, while another argued she should be studied, for perhaps she carried power that could protect them. But their voices were drowned by a sudden outburst from the girl herself, because her body had begun to shake violently again. Sparks of energy flickering from her arms, she cried out, clutching her chest. And before anyone could react, a shockwave burst from her body, a ring of invisible force that rattled the huts and knocked several villagers to the ground. Dust rose into the night, and the people screamed, scattering in terror as the girl stood frozen, horrified at what she had just done. Her tears glistened in the dim firelight, her voice breaking as she begged them to understand she had not meant to hurt anyone. But fear was stronger than her words. Villagers threw stones at her feet, shouting that she should leave, that she was a danger to their children. Her own friends hid their faces, refusing to meet her eyes, and the girl's heart shattered as she realized she no longer belonged among them. Yet she could not blame them, because even she was terrified of what she had become. She ran into the night, her glowing form vanishing between the trees, the villagers locking their doors behind her, leaving her to the dark wilderness, trembling and alone. Far from the village, she collapsed under a large twisted tree, her body burning with waves of energy. She pressed her hands into the ground and felt the earth tremble beneath her fingers, glowing cracks spreading across the soil. She pulled back in panic, hugging herself, whispering that she wanted it to stop, that she only wanted to be normal again. But the serum inside her blood had already taken root, spreading deeper, rewriting her body in ways she could not see. Her mind raced with fear and despair, yet also with strange hunger and instinct she could not explain. She felt stronger but also unstable, as though her own body was betraying her, every beat of her heart carrying both pain and power.